Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on December the 11th, 2016. Generally what I do is to show you that the big agenda is on course, always is on course, and when there's any possibility of it getting slowed down, it never gets waylaid, but if it's getting slowed down, it simply changes parties and things like that. It's an old trick, because we've been living through this our whole lives, and your parents, grandparents before you. The techniques of managing people, the vast herds of people as they call them at the top, are ancient, very, very, very old indeed. And politics especially is a much more carefully engineered system to try and cater for every group, which they can even create. You remember that all groups are created, and to be created they ought to get funded to begin with. And then you have the big Soros-type characters, the so-called philanthropists, that look for new types to create and divide and conquer, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. Then they can use those groups too, either en masse, coming together, networking together and protesting the same things, or you can spearhead society off into a different direction. Everything is power, everything is control, and herd management. The average government today really just engages in herd management to an extent, where all the big players, the big NGO players, the guys who control the NGOs and create them and fund them at the top, you find that they're the guys who direct the future, and they're all on board in one big club at the top. And I'm not kidding about that too. You'll never find one of the so-called multi-billionaires becoming a philanthropist and going off on some other tangent. It's always the exact same belief that they'll put out there. They don't have to think about what they believe in. It's already written out for them, because most of them are actually front people, these so-called geniuses that you are being taught to believe in. They're front people. Go into the history, for instance, of even the British old Secret Service, Secret Intelligence Service, and you'll find that they had front organizations, many front organizations, which are actually big, real corporations involved in armaments and things like that. The CIA is exactly the same. They did it on a much, much bigger scale. All kinds of real corporations out there, and anything to do with technologies and emerging technologies, they must always make sure that they're in charge, and it's theirs completely, because they never give all of it to the public, because power is control of these things. When you have the control and the use of the most advanced technology and you suppress it to the public, then you control the public. It's quite easy. But you must always put out your front men that you pretend are geniuses. And they're well taken care of for their whole lives long. And they'll parrot off the occasional nonsense to the public who parrot it like they're gods or something. Because most folk are followers. And most folk really want to believe that they're on the cutting edge of in an open society where everything, all truth is being told to them. They really want to believe, even though daily on the news, even on what passes as news, they're getting lied to, and occasionally it's found out too. They still never learn from the fact that news is always being exposed as fake down the road. How can you have real news when most of reality is generally sealed up and under the Official Secrets Act for about 50 years at least? Even the NAFTA agreement for Canada, it was put in a bunker for, I think, up to 2030 or something. And then it can be resealed for another 50 years or whatever. And that's how things really, really happen. Same with all the stuff to do, never mind JFK, my God, they've gone to town with that. If you want a career as an author, just keep rewriting these books. All the investigating stuff has been done, and you just need to copy all the previous books. It's quite easy, and put your own spin on it, and you can go do the talk shows. And same thing happened with 9/11, a great career for folk who want to keep rehashing it. But the thing is, you'll find out maybe in 50 to 100 years the truth about these things. Because they're all when something is sealed for a period of time under Official Secrets Act, then it means that the whole population has obviously been lied to, and there's a reason they don't want you to know that at the time. And that's how things really go. It's only now, as I've mentioned before, that some of the truth of even World War I, the real causes behind it all, are being released for the first time to the general population. World War II will have to take its turn down the road eventually as well. But when you're living through these these con games, remember that most of life is a con game. There are much, much bigger powers at play than the people you think are running your countries. Much, much bigger. I'll give an example. For instance, you have to think that people are actually mad at the top. They're always just plain and simply mad. They're mad people for allowing craziness to occur that could have been avoided. So either they're mad or it's part of some other plan, you see. When you think about the ice storms, for instance, they've had in Canada over the years, where whole big cities can be shut down totally, all electricity is out. And when they push, like Quebec or Montreal, mainly electrical heating, you have no heat. And then the government's asking folk to donate their electric gas generators and so on to help these poor souls survive until they get electricity up and running, maybe in a month or 2 months, maybe 3 months' time. And yet with all of these things which we know about, the government is still pushing so-called clean fuel, which is nuclear fuel. In a country like Canada, where we could have all the electrical supplies and a lot more to go into the States from massive dams, hydroelectric dams. But no, it's got to be nuclear. Because big corporations own all, monopolies. And if they go down through electrical supply, regardless of electric is electric, it has to get traveled to the homes by power lines. If it goes down because of storms or whatever, then people just will freeze to death by the millions because they won't have access to alternative means of heating themselves under all the pollution and carbon taxes laws and so on. So they're either all mad or this is part of the big, big plan, including depopulation. And what would that teach you? Apart from getting angry about it if it happened, you see. What would it actually teach the population, and how would they spin it across to the public? Because every disaster which is created or caused or planned is always used by those at the top who know how to use and manipulate by techniques every tragedy. And that's why they often create tragedies too, to get something else through. Well, they would tell you, well, look what happened. Well, it wouldn't be because they all froze to death because the power went out. It would be because there were too many people in the first place living outside of the big, big cities, probably. And they'll tell you that, we can manage the crisis easier and faster in the big cities, and yada, yada. They'd have many, many reasons and things to fulfill by using the so-called tragedy and by causing it in the first place. Because obviously, if you have a few methods of heating yourself, and the most obvious one has worked for thousands and thousands of years, which is wood. In Canada, for instance. Other countries have had stacks of coal, and plenty of coal at that, for that matter. And of course, they've got the children all, as soon as you say something, Pavlovian response, they go into shock about smoke, and they're completely ignorant of the fact that with all the modern scrubbers and filters they have in these systems that they create smoke, there's no smoke coming out. It's all burned. All the carbon is literally recycled, burned and burned and burned. So nothing is excess. That doesn't matter, because facts don't matter when there are big agendas at work. But for any nation to ban, and they can ban it many ways. They can price it out of existence. They keep fining you out of existence. They can license fee it out to the extremes so you can't afford it out of existence. There are many ways to do things. But if the fact is, when governments mandate this is the only system you can use, which is for some big monopoly, then you're being murdered. You're being set up to be murdered, really, and given no choice to save yourself in time of crisis. Big, big plans. It amazes me how people think they're free. It truly does. And it amazes me even more to see people run off to vote for politicians who say the right things during election time. And no matter how many times that you tell them or point out in their own lifetime what things that have happened that they've all fallen for, they fall for the next one again and again. They want to believe that there really are modern-day messianic humanists out there who are out there to help and save them. They want to believe that so badly, which is a result really of socialism. Socialism can take many forms. To an extent, if you look at the old monarchy system, before they gave you the front organization called Parliament, then you had all these people getting hired, the Alan Liddell type characters who would sing songs about how wonderful the king or the queen was, and how they were the father or mother to the people, and etc. So you're always an infant to the great mother or the great father there, who provides everything and really cares about you. That's what you're told. You can't get near them, because they kill you if you're a peasant and so on. But the fact is, you're taught to revere these people because they're somehow superior and better than you, and they're closer to the big God than you are because they're up there and you're not. It's quite simple, isn't it? So it's a form of socialism too. And they would take most through the nobility and extraction of taxes, which was done through all your crops and everything. About 60% of your produce was taken from you. And a little bit was left in non-intensive farming techniques was for you and maybe your family, maybe a few helpers, and for the animals and so on that you had. That was standard taxation in the feudal system. And you were proud of it too, and you loved the king and queen because you didn't love them because they could actually, they get word of it because in all ages they've had their spies out there listening to chitter-chatter and punishing you generally severely if you say the wrong thing. It always reminds me of someone else who'd obviously been well trained in espionage and spying, and who actually was a member of MI5, as many of the authors were during World War II in Britain, and that was George Orwell. But he did know, and he wrote it in his book 1984, a lot of giveaways about the technique of how it all runs. And he mentioned that when Winston was being tortured by O'Brien, it wasn't good enough that he simply repeated what O'Brien wanted him to repeat. That Winston had to start to believe it himself, that it was true. And that's always been the way of it. To torture and torture and torture you until you believe the king or the queen is your mummy or your daddy, your great mother or father. And that's what they called them across in the British Empire, countries across Africa, etc. Queen Victoria was a great mother. But you had to believe it. And people who were rather primitive, as they call it, uneducated, would often believe it and be utterly shocked and despair when supplies for food during a famine didn't come. Things like that. It's sad. It's terribly sad. This natural instincts of trust don't belong in a system where the psychopaths rule, because they belong in a system where decent people help each other. It doesn't mean you're all perfect in any way at all, but you're pretty well decent, and you'll help each other during crisis. The psychopath wants power for themselves. Helping other folk dispenses the power. You don't want to share the power, you want to have it to yourself, so you want the monopoly of power of things which they need. Food, water, and then everything else from there. That's how it works. And all those great philanthropists that stir up revolution across the world for their own reasons and purposes know this too, as power, because that's what they use as power. And they know how to upset the power structure in a country in order to swing it over so they themselves can take over more and more power in those countries. It's sad but true, isn't it? But people are truly trained. And again, innately, they're trusting people. If you're born in a simple tribe, say 100 people, maybe less, you would naturally have trust because you're all dependent on each other. Everyone's dependent on each other in a simple tribe. And that's a natural way to be, natural trust. It doesn't mean that they're foolish. They still have their laws and their regulations. Very simple again. And it's easy to manage too, the laws, the simple regulations, because there's only a small number of them. If there's no money involved, there's no monetary system which is an access and a route to gaining more power, then they can remain that way for a long, long time and helping each other out when they have to. The deviancy creeps in with money, where the psychopath, who can't exist without this system, by the way, the psychopath can take over by conning the gullibility of a trusting people, by promising them things. And the psychopath knows to cause a problem and then put himself forward as a savior to save them all. Very old technique again. This history is full of this kind of thing. But when you bring money into it, the psychopath can then hire as many goons as he wants from all over. It doesn't have to be from the tribe, to police and keep in check all those people that he now rules over. Money distorts a lot of things, and money enables the psychopath to survive and live awfully well. You'll find in every primitive culture to have techniques of dealing with the psychopath. And I'm talking about primitive, I'm talking about natural cultures that don't use a money system. And they're small enough groups that their survival really depends on each other. Someone coming in and causing dissension. And a psychopath is fantastic for manipulating other people to start arguing with other people. That's their technique of disempowering people, or even getting rid of a potential superior by chit-chat, and then it comes down to, oh, well, so-and-so said that, not me. And then they're all arguing with each other. Then the psychopath gets promoted up above them. That's how the corporate business world really works. And politics too. But the psychopath in a simple system doesn't survive very well. He's reduced to stealing because he won't work. He won't work. He might put on a show of working for a little while, but it can't last with them. They don't have it in them. They don't believe in working for themselves. They believe that you should work for them instead. And that's why they hone the skills of manipulation. They're born with them, excess skills, and they use them to perfection. And how many are destroyed in the process of them getting up there themselves, it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. And that goes down to world wars, for instance, and everything else combined. Therefore, you can take for granted in your lifetime, you're always going to have strife. There's never peace. Never peace. You've always got the Soros types, and he's only one of many in the same big, giant octopus club at the top, who can stir it up when it suits them, and they profit off it too. And they put all the memes forward, and all they bribe a lot of politicians. Yes, they do. They bribe them. Of course they do. There's nothing new in politicians taking bribes of all kinds. And I've read many articles over many, many years about that kind of thing happening. Even the doctors get it too, by the big drug companies, big special holidays abroad, all the best of this, best of that, and all the good-looking females thrown in it, all that kind of stuff. You know all these stories. And you can check them up yourselves, and you can find that they're true. And that's the system of money, which tells you what's important, what is valuable, and what is not. Let's be honest, gold is not valuable as far as a metal goes. It's only by the ones who tell you what value is, the ones who brought you silver, gold, diamonds, and what's valuable and what's not. And then end up, the ones at the very top of those groups end up running their cultures through their banking system and their fake lending system, their chronology, because it's all based on chronology, as you well know. And chronology can be kept going for an awful long time, like the Wizard of Oz. And if you want to collapse it whenever it suits you, you can collapse it too, and it's always to get something else through for your own benefit, not for the public. That's how everything really, really works. the cunning men, the crafty men, the men who do things with craft, as they always said in their secret societies. But most folk are not crafty. Most folk believe what they're told, and most folk react immediately with emotion. And that's why you're used so easily. And that's how you can create flash mobs. I've read the articles from the military talking about flash mobs being created and how they could be used, which means they will be used down the road. And a mob is a mob. It's a mindless mass of emotion, where some instigator, someone who understands techniques can whip up the emotion immediately, blind raw rage, and then lay the trail down for them to follow to enrage them even further, and then they're convinced, and then the mob are used for your bidding. And that's what's happening now, as you well know, with the policing of the net getting further and further into what was planned a long time ago. They talked about it years and years and years ago. And I knew, for instance, that the computer was only meant to be supposedly, I mean, I stress supposedly, free in many ways for X amount of years to get you all on it. It was imperative to get everybody on the planet on the internet, because that's how they can completely police you daily with your consent, and you do it quite willingly. Most folk do it quite willingly. And it's much better than the old Stasi style, where they had to hire one or two of your friends to spy on you. And that's pretty well everybody in Eastern Germany had people spying on them at some time in their life and reporting to the Stasi, the secret police. We have a much better system because you think you're free. And here's the internet, and oh yeah, you get lots of oohs and ahs and wows on it, but at the same time, you don't think about the power technique of it and how it's used by the rich and powerful who gave it to you in the first place, and how they'd eventually police it when now it's the time to police it rigorously. And then out of that comes a whole bunch of new laws of the thought police, which are going to get put into operation, complete full operation, very, very shortly, in fact. And once something's on the books, it expands. It doesn't have to go through any more debates. It simply just amend it and expand it until you're completely covered and you can't move, mentally or otherwise, unless it's approved. But we live through this, and we live through the fact that people are emotional creatures, and we do live through the fact that the techniques of mass manipulation are very old. The same techniques too, where they develop people to go off and kill other peoples abroad somewhere for wars. Same techniques. Blind raw rage, and then of course when the public start to do this blind raw rage and attack who they're told to attack, then things happen that are foreseen by those who decided it all in the first place, and then the laws come out, and then you're all hamstrung, as they say. You're all tied up. Cause and effect. It's very much like, and understand what I'm talking about, it's very old. And shortly, other talk show hosts will be part of what I'm saying probably this week, because there are certain ones out there that do that all the time, including even take my bio, by the way, and put it on theirs. But anyway, you'll find that the founding fathers of the US knew all this stuff too. They all knew the stuff. It's like when they came out after writing up their constitution or their agreement, and Franklin was asked, what kind of government have you given us? And that's very telling itself that you've given us. But he says a republic if you can keep it. Well, every American today thinks they've got a democracy, and most of them are totally ignorant of the difference, because they have been living in what seems to be running as a democracy their whole lives. But it's not. A republic has a set of rules that can't be bust or broken by incoming groups of politicians, which eventually changed the entire system. That's why a republic has all these rules of what it is. But also they knew, and you find it with Jefferson, for instance, he knew that if you give people the right to manage their own affairs individually, that would be the ideal system, where everyone would mind their own business, help each other when necessary, voluntarily, and not demand that other folk believe or do as they do. And then you force it on them by law. He knew that. Because if they didn't do that, then government would then rule man. And rule is different from just govern man. It's rule man. If you can't rule yourself and govern yourself, you will be ruled. And all people do all the time is consistently show that they can't rule themselves. They can't do it. Mind you, they're not encouraged to do it because the system run by the big monopoly men at the top have given you all the pornography to make sure that you're hypersexualized. And probably you'll stay that way until you're about 50, maybe longer. Until that dominates your lives and nothing else will really get done in your lifetime. And it won't matter in a socialistic system. But there are many, many ways that you have to rule. And the first thing you do at ruling yourself is thinking for yourself. Why is this article out there? Think about it. Think about the consequences if you acted on this article or that article or whatever it happened to be. And then say, who wants me to be happy or angry or non-committal? What would they benefit by me being so? Because I'm not kidding you, these techniques are used against everyone every day of the week. I said years ago, if I see a mob forming in the street, I'm going to turn and go the other way. I don't care what they say they're there for. A mob is what's portrayed, remember, in the old Frankenstein movies. There they are. There's the monster, get him! And they're up the hill there and want to kill him. That's the mob. If someone's trying to turn you into a mob, who are they? What will they benefit by doing so? Do you understand the whole topic? Etc., etc. Folk don't think through. They really don't, do they? It's sad but true. Too long in this morass of socialism, as they call it. And don't think you understand socialism, even if you're a socialist, because you don't. You'll find that decadence always is pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed until those people that were supposed to be going to benefit from socialism end up being decadent themselves. Not because they're eating too much or something like that. It's because of all the things they're told to enjoy, which end up destroying everything that kept them valid in the first place, which is a family unit destroyed, gone. Selfishness is all that matters. Me, 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 me. And then they're into all kinds of things which have no function in nature whatsoever, and they go extinct. But then when you also have the committed, idealist, crazy people at the top, which isn't very often you get that at the top. There's always someone much higher who's not so crazy. Demanding that you stop driving your cars, demanding you all get into the big cities, demanding that you only use electricity to heat yourselves, and that's all you'll have, which is setting you up as a safer mass disaster. Or abuse, because after all, they can start rationing electricity, which they will do under the Agenda 21 agreement. There's all techniques. The financial is always one of them. And the more you use, the more you pay. And if you can't pay any more, then you have to go on rationing. And then you're rationed, just like Britain, it already is, and so many thousands die in their homes every winter because they don't have all the fuel credits. That's socialism. Control, control, control to death. And then you're trained that your life has no real value except to the state. And once you hit a certain age and you get sick, then do the right thing and take the euthanasia pill and get out the way. That's already being encouraged, folks. That all that goes hand in glove with it. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. And then eventually everything becomes normal and expected. This is expected way you go. Do the right thing. We don't want to spend money to treat you and make you live in there 20 years. No. Die, do the right thing. After all, you're just a common person. You know, a good socialist. It's all really in our faces. All of it's in our faces. It really is. The point of those behind Agenda 21, 2030, and all the other different titles for the same thing, it's the same agenda for the whole century, remember, the 21st century. All has to be accomplished this century. Massive reduction in populations, because they don't need you anymore. Who doesn't? They don't need you at the top. The top folk don't need you. The elitists, the ones who own you and own your political systems. Completely. And they've been dying for a long, long time, so to speak, to have you all die off much faster and faster and faster, which you're doing already anyway with your cancers galore and your massive glycophosphates and everything else that you're eating. It's all allowed by law. As long as you don't all die at the same time, then no one gets suspicious. We're managed like a big herd. And unfortunately, we too often behave like a big herd as well. Prompt them and here they go. Here's the nudge from Sunstein and away they go. Nudge, nudge, away they go. You can get folk by using psychological warfare and indoctrination to do anything that you want them to do. And the trick is always to make them think they're in charge of themselves. All the way. To the end. It's beautiful, really, when you understand it. But then again, they've had all the time and money in the world by studying us, because they create the money, just print it up. And technically all the other people at the bottom work along their projects for them, the people with the brains, and feed all the data upwards. So it's no real mystery as to how they can manage to manage us at all in such incredible detail. But yeah, we do have incredible monitoring on all of us. All of us do. I've done too many stories over the years on this admitted policies and admitted techniques that they use on all the population, all the time, and why they gave you the internet in the first place. They couldn't do anything they're doing without it. They'd have to give you just better and more TV shows if they didn't give you the internet. And TV itself is one heck of a powerful weapon. And Spielberg said that himself. It changed everything. As all behaviorists know, you put something scientifically created into the environment. And what environment? Any environment. Cell phone towers, for instance, on hills, or everything that's used computer-wise in your home or in your pocket. And your behavior changes. Anything at all, your behavior changes. Put something different. The TV did it, and folk rushed home to see their favorite serial because it left you with a cliffhanger the night before. Or your boring job, which most jobs tend to be boring for most folk. It was driving you crazy, and you're on home to see your comedy. Get a bit of light relief and your indoctrination along with it. So television could alter behavior, and it did alter behavior. Before that, radio did the same thing. They did all the experimentation with the serials and the cliffhangers with radio long before the television. And they also managed to change people's opinions about different things on behalf of their masters through talk shows on radio long before the television came out too. Here's what your opinion should be, and people would adopt the opinions very, very, very easily. When you see how many psychologists, psychiatrists, behaviorists work on all your favorite television shows, then you should ask the obvious questions: why are they all working on what seems to be entertainment? But then again, most folk won't. Because we have an infinite capacity to be entertained, a craving, a real addiction. Because life right now is pretty well boring, isn't it? When you get past a certain stage where you don't have to hunt and gather as they love to call it, for basic survival, where most of your day would be basic survival, especially in the colder climates, then you have free time in your hands. If you have free time in your hands, you could improve your ability to think for yourself. Or your masters, which they will do, and they always do, make sure there's lots of things that they provide for you to, and you'll buy it or rent it or whatever it happens to be entertained, to make sure you have the right entertainment and you don't start entertaining yourself or thinking for yourself. Your time could be a problem to your masters. They had big talks in the British Parliament about this at the end of the Industrial Revolution, or in the middle of it actually, because you had all the different the do-gooders there wanting to cut the work day down by an hour or two, from maybe 16 or 18 hours down to maybe 12. And the masters who owned it all and who owned Parliament at that time said, oh no, the people might have time to think for themselves, and they might chat in their free time, or they might go to pubs and drink and exchange viewpoints, and that might be cause problems down the road for us. And partly they were right, eventually right, because after, say, World War I, then World War II, you had this, again, the creeping socialism coming in, and the socialists themselves don't realize they're getting used by other powers, often outside their own countries, for different directed means and ends than the ones they imagine. It's no coincidence that the bar started to put televisions in every single pub until no one could hear themselves talking anymore for these ridiculous sports, screaming and yelling matches in the pubs on the television. Nothing is coincidental. And for those who think they're actually exchanging lots of viewpoints and got more freedoms than ever through the internet, or they're tweeting, or whatever it happens to be, think again. Think again. You're given instant, immediate access to your thoughts as they happen, to your masters who know how to head everything off at the pass. Because you're telling them what you're thinking. They can tell, too, where your kind of thinking might lead to. It's all algorithms. People who thought this will then think this. So you're given nudges and prompts to where to go next. And then you think you came to your own conclusions on something. No, you didn't. We're given a gift to think for ourselves, and very few folk ever take it for themselves. Isn't that awfully sad? Isn't it awfully sad that millions of people go to their deaths never knowing what really is going on? Part of the reason most folk don't ever really know what's really going on their entire life is that they're rushed through life. They're distracted through life. And they're frightened through life by the authorities. Always tell, oh, you're going to have a crash, a financial crash. Oh, you're going to die in poverty if you don't get enough of a pension. Oh, you're gonna. That's how folk rush through lives, never really knowing what's really going on. And the big boys at the top just laugh away. Laugh, laugh, laugh. All the time, laugh. Because they themselves will never experience any of these fears, ever. And they know it too. Can you imagine being born into a family that never have ordinary fears of poverty, of ending up on the street because you can't pay their rent or mortgage, whatever it happens to be? Or thinking, well, I can't afford this operation, it's too expensive for me. Actually, let's improve it Canadian-wise and say, for the likes of me, because that's what they're really training you in Canada. You see, you're just a little peasant. A good socialist peasant, because you don't rock the boat. But do the right thing, take this pill, it's cheap, and away you go. That's how things work. And that's how you're all being trained all the time. And at one time, you could look around the world for countries that give you some peace. Remember, this is a world order. They don't want anyone to escape it, but there are a few places you can still go to and hopefully live a few years of your life in quasi-peace, as opposed to what's happening or getting rammed down your throat at home. But it's rather sad, isn't it? It's very, very sad. I'm just going to touch on a few articles tonight. That's all. Just touch on them. Not to scare you, but to show you how buttons get pushed at a very higher level, and everything goes into operation at the same time to push certain things through, agendas through, certain memes through, that kind of thing. It's all worked out that way. And we already have, for instance, other countries lambasting Canada about being so far, far left socialistic, idealistically socialistic, with all the things that are happening inside of it. I read one article recently from Israel, in fact, and they don't mess around about anything. And basically they're saying this is the end of the country when they can't really stand up for themselves anymore under the massive socialistic system, where literally people in the federal government are often selected, especially with this present regime, by where they came from or what genetic background that they have or whatever it happens to be. Nothing to do with how well will you help run the country. Or maybe it just tells you that they're all front people and it really doesn't matter anyway. That's maybe the truer. Could be that. But see, Israel is bashing it, saying it's the end of it and so on. And I understand what they mean by that. But then you look at what's happening under this, as the whole world supposedly going socialist, this strange thing that they still train the people that's all for them, that they're all equal, it's all for them. And it's what a lie, what a lie that is. Right? But they keep telling them that. And I guess people want to believe it, don't they? They really want to believe that. See, freedom is not belonging to a special group. But they appear to turn it into that, don't they? You have to get elevated. And I mean elevated, not equal, but elevated into a special group, above all the majority of the nobodies, to get noticed at all, or get special rules that affect you and save you or protect you, whatever it happens to be. And even these special rules, they'll help you get ahead in life with your job. Not are you good enough for the job? Do you know the job well enough? Or any of that? No, it's special group. I'm a special group person, and I'm employed because you need special group people in the federal government or the local government or whatever it happens to be. It's all nonsense. And that is mad, of course, if it really comes down to that, isn't it? It really is. Because then eventually you become staid and stale after a while, until you have to belong to a special group. And it just goes into absurdity. More absurdity than it already is. Anyway, this is the kind of nonsense you get fed right now. I mean, Canada's I always think about Bezmenov, who defected. That wasn't his real name, but that was he from the Soviet Union, and he eventually worked with the CBC Canada. And he said, and it was the Soviet Union that he worked for, not the modern Russia. And he said he met more true communists in the CBC than he did in the Soviet Union. And he wasn't just quipping and laughing about it, he was telling the truth. Because the true ones, see, people in the Soviet Union knew they better play the game, or it could be rather fatal for them. But they also knew the truth of it, because they lived in it, to the extreme of it. And whereas Canada's still trying to get there. But BBC was the same in Britain. All national, governmentally run organisations are the same as propaganda purposes, even though the BBC is a big chunk of it is now owned by the CIA, believe it or not. I read the article on the air years ago. Everything is for controlling your mind and your brain and prompting you. Enjoy this documentary, enjoy this movie, now emulate it. I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Now, this article here is to do with the white bashing that's going on for so long in Canada, by whites themselves too. They're, again, brainwashing and being good socialists. It says CBC has produced a bizarre music video hailing an inevitable future where white people are made extinct. Well, let's rephrase made extinct. You see, that's under the definition, even at the United Nations, of genocide. That would fit right in there. You know, even destroying a person's language comes under genocide. Everything is cultural genocide that leads to actual genocide, etc. But anyway, the CBC produced this music video for a comedy, supposedly. It's okay, you can put in comedies and mock different people. Depends who you're mocking. Doesn't it? Very much so depend who you're mocking, isn't it? And anyway, Inevitable Future, where white people are made extinct. The video, which was produced for the comedy show, the star has 22 minutes and stars Canadian actor Sean Majumder, says a beige horizon where we're all going to look the same as inevitable, and mocks how pure breeds are losing their grip. Now, they're awfully selective in who they pick for mocking it. Isn't that true? And it's unfortunate that the silent majority of people in the world who are pretty decent put up with this kind of stuff. And they don't want to rock the boat or annoy anybody and so on. But you can imagine that there are groups out there that you've done the same too, the same kind of thing too. And they'd be screaming to high heaven, it'd be mentioned in Parliament, and oh my goodness. And everybody would be immediately biting their fingernails, oh, do something about it. And because you see, as I mentioned from the article condemning Canada and what's happening in Canada from Israel, they know in Israel that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And you never let it squeak. You always scream. Scream, because you can't allow things to start. That's the key to it. Once you start allowing yourself to be the target of ridicule of all kinds, and slander, and nastiness, you're as well as just, going the way of the dodo bird. Hang up your hat for good, the grand finale. And in Canada, I guess you could take your euthanasia pill, and then leave the whole country in peace, right? That's what. But they want this go quietly and leave it in peace to all the folk who are then going to run it properly, right? Mm-hmm. So we're constantly being played with, constantly. But it depends who you are and what group you're actually shoved into. Where you put yourself into it or not doesn't matter anymore, does it? Because your betters above you will shove you into that group. Oh, you're so-and-so. Yeah. Take all this nastiness. We have a modern society where, through unseen forces, there are people more victimized on a daily basis by authorized victimization by the system. And as I've said before, it's time that everybody started taking their share of the grease for the axle and screaming. Because if you don't, you will go the way of the dodo bird. Very simple. Now let's just go into also the corruption that's normal amongst all these folk who push socialism. And this article here says Clinton Foundation advised World Bank on contracts that netted donors millions of dollars. And the foundation's drug company contributors got majority of funds from tuberculosis program. I'll put that up just to show you a tiny wee bit of how the whole corruption works. I'm so sick reading this stuff myself because it's everywhere in every country. And all these big foundations are the same. It says drug companies that have donated to Hillary Clinton's foundations received most of the contract money from an international tuberculosis initiative after the foundation was brought on to manage the initiative's procurement operation, public records show. Now remember too that these big charitable organizations work with the World Bank, the private bank called the World Bank, that works with the Bank for International Settlements, set up by the Royal Institute for International Affairs, private club, CFR. They own them. And all these big philanthropists work with them. Eh? Isn't that amazing? Eh? And you help finance it too. And as I say, the Clintons and so on, they worked with them, and big bucks pass around, and again, a lot of your money to pass around and went really into obvious pockets because it certainly didn't end up going where it's supposed to go. And then you get this one too. For those who remember Julia Gillard in Australia, who was a Prime Minister, who became a head of some big philanthropic organisation. And it says the biggest donor countries behind the $4.6 billion global partnership for education, chaired by Julia Gillard, warned they could withdraw funding unless they were shown evidence of improved education outcomes for children in poor countries. Everything is to do with helping, isn't it? That's where the psychopath goes. That's where he goes into politics. He doesn't say I'm going into politics because I want to scam everybody and become incredibly stinking rich and powerful. He says, I want to help people. It's the same thing, isn't it? Anyway, it says, since 2003, $4.6 billion is poured into developing countries. $370 million of this from Australian taxpayers is the equivalent over the past 8 years. Ms. Gillard, who has been chairwoman since February 2014, pledged $270 million of this while she was Prime Minister. And then who's she working with? The World Bank again, same as the Clintons. Well, it's a coincidence, isn't it? Yep. That's how it works. It's all coincidences. The biggest crooks always hide behind respectability. The more respectable they seem to be because they put so much money out in propaganda, then the more corrupt they are. That's just how it really is. You've got to hand to psychopaths, though, because psychopaths are pretty good. They're not stupid, you know. They're not stupid. They understand how you think and how you're going to see things, and they make sure that you do. And he's a new one too for the recent election in the US. Hundreds of Canadian residents contributed money to the US candidates. It says hundreds of Canadian residents, including a former Conservative member of Parliament and an aide to a Liberal cabinet minister, have been contributing money to the US election campaign, CBC News learned. The vast majority of the contributions from Canada went to Democratic President candidate Hillary Clinton, naturally, and Bernie Sanders, or to the Democratic Party. Of the more than 450 individual contributors identified by CBC News, only 2 contributed to Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. And this goes on and on and on. To do with all the incredible progression, really legal progression of hacking you by governmental organizations and so on. Things that they've been doing since the beginning of spying on us all, completely, all the time, even though it wasn't quite legal to do so under that. Never hadn't written the laws to stop themselves doing it. Now they're simply writing them all the laws to allow themselves to completely spy on you all the time, from all kinds of sources. One article, FBI to gain expanded hacking powers as Senate effort blocks. Fails. They tried to stop it supposedly, but it failed. In other words, they paid off somebody. And investigative powers bill, politicians exempt themselves from new wide-ranging spying laws. So, again, I love socialism because it is so equal, isn't it? And politicians have exempted themselves from Britain's new wide-ranging spying laws. Quite something. You're rather fed up with humanity, don't you? It's just repetition. Again, because psychopaths end up at the top anyway. And those psychopaths, the senior psychopaths, always make sure they train the younger psychopaths to. So it continues, and things are very boring and monotonous because they're so repetitious. Another article, the FBI will now find it easier to hack your computer no matter where you are. And the change, effective Thursday, affects Rule 41 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, which are proposed by the U.S. Department of Justice and approved by the Supreme Court of U.S. Allow federal investigators to seek permission from a magistrate judge in, say, Texas to plant hacking software or on a computer that's disguising its location. They're way beyond that, folks. I love how they pretend they're not. They're way, way beyond all that stuff. Every computer and everything you buy electronically has already got the chips in it for spying. It's quite something, isn't it? I can remember when I was very small thinking about the documentaries they'd put out on scientists playing with rats and mazes and things like that and teaching them to pull little levers to get a seed, etc. And I knew they didn't want to train rats to join the workforce, so therefore it was for humans, obviously. They were finding out all the different ways to prompt humans to do certain things. It's done all the time on us. It's incredible. When you're really small, you think, well, they could never do that because we're not rats or mice. But we really are much, much closer than you think. All they have to do is give you all these different cards for different stores, and you'll save $1 here and $1 there, and folk grab them, and next thing you know, all the stuff that they're buying is being recorded and sent off to different agencies, including governments. And then you bring out the internet, it's even better, and then you end up with the article here, which is where it's all supposed to go. It's to do with China, which, believe you me, is only doing what I'm sure every other country is doing as well. It says in the US, big data is a major trend that's been adopted by almost every major retailer in an effort to figure out the precise way to convince Americans to buy more stuff they don't need. In China, big data is all about population control. But it's really about all control of the population. That's really a better way of putting it. And it goes in through the Communist Party of China, which is a joke too, in communist, as far as communist goes, where really an oligarchy runs the whole country with slave labor, and no one can object to it because nasty things happen when you do. But China, remember, is still the United Nations model for the whole world to copy. If you haven't quite got that yet, they've said it many, many times in their own reports. China is the model state for the whole world to emulate. They run the country perfectly. And everything's orders, but from the top, there's nobody bitches about it or complains because you can't. So it works awfully efficiently from that point of view. And I'll put this article up tonight to show you all the different techniques that are used and doing little rat projects on us. Because it's not just China, as I say. It's a bit of a joke to claim it's just like China. We're way ahead of that too in so many different ways on prompting the public through their various prompts and nudges that they use. There's a thousand times a day from different sources through marketing companies and your government as well. And it's so easy. It's sad, isn't it? So easy. If you just say it's going to save you so many dollars, if you just get this card or you just do this, and or you get so much free. Oh, it's so sad, isn't it? When you're giving up your freedoms of all kinds and privacy because something, yet a little fringe benefit of some useless piece of rubbish that's going to be thrown in there. Isn't that sad? That's how easy it is to manipulate human beings. Isn't it sad? Isn't it terribly sad, folks? But that's the way it is, isn't it? Awfully sad, terribly sad. Tragic, terrifying. But look around you. Look around you. It's too easy. Anyway, from Ontario, Canada, from myself, Alan Watt, where it's snowing and way below freezing already because of global warming. It's good night, and may your God or your gods go with you.
is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.